Let me tell you a little bit about the subject today. Is as you will see, is the care centers, and I call it red light, green light, or amber light, and the potential dangers of daycare centers. In fact, that's the title of the paper that I wrote probably some 20-some years ago. And I took an interest in this because I was alarmed that there was a time here in the middle 60s, in fact it was during the Nixon's presidency, that there was a national movement, particularly in Congress, to create like a national daycare service for children. And that was a source of great concern to those of us that understood development and knew what had happened in the countries that had done that. And we tried to articulate what were the reasons why this shouldn't be done. And that's when I wrote this paper, Daycare Centers, that became very well known at the time. And the paper today is based on this, only that have been updated with information that is, of course, current information of, as you will see in a moment, about brain development and the neurobiology of brain development and what the brain does need in order to achieve this idea of potential. Now, when I am talking of daycare centers, I need to make clear to you that I am particularly talking about certain age groups, that the danger, as I see it myself, is enormous, particularly in the first year and a half of life. And you will see the reasons for that. I will give you the data. I don't want to proselytize anybody into believing anything. I give you the data and you draw your own conclusions. And I have very little doubt what your conclusions are going to be once you have the information. Unfortunately, this information is not widely available, but as I said, I'm particularly concerned with children that are placed in daycare situations since birth, practically, or maybe a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks afterwards, until they go to school, essentially, and can stay there the whole day, which parents work. And as you understand, in our present societal conditions, there are some economic factors that force many, many families to use their cares, because it's difficult for many, many couples to keep themselves afloat if both members of that partnership don't work. That is, if the wife or the husband don't go to work. And so I have become a kind of social necessity of sorts, given the economic development of the country and the standard of life that we have reached, and the fact that in order to do that, many, many, many families have to have more than one member of the family working. In the past, that was not the case for a number of reasons. One of them being that there was not enough work around for more than one member of each family, and that usually was the father. So the mother job was clearly defined by the very economical factors, and now forcing her to go to work. So that's the group that I have the most concern about, and you will see why the damage can be very massive. The second most endangered group, as you see there, is less fundamentally so than the previous one, is the children between 1.5 and 2.5 to 3 years of age. And the reason for that is relatively simple. Brain development really never stops, but it achieves most of its growth, at least in terms of weight, not in terms of being programmed and developing functional activities and capacities until much later, but at least in terms of the anatomical structures that constitute the brain, is usually finished between 2 to 3 years of age, for the most part. Indeed, as you will see in a moment, I'll give you some data about that. Obviously then, the potential damage to children outside these two groups is very significantly reduced because the brain has achieved its development, has matured, and has essentially received the software by means of the interaction with the figures in the environment that take care of the child, that it needs to start on a good foot in its developmental career. So for all the children that the damage is significantly reduced, and we won't discuss it here, so there are some problems as well, but not as significantly by any means. Now, what makes the difference? Well, there are many factors that influence this, and I will run through some of them. The quality of the care that is provided in the daycare center, they are very different from one another. And the ratio of the staff to patient is very different. The people that runs the daycare is different. The people that take care of children are different. And you will see some examples of the differences later on. And but the most important thing is that not all daycare centers take children of all ages. Some do, some take from birth to whatever age, usually 5 years of age or 6 years of age. Many daycare centers don't do that. They take only slightly older children. Though unfortunately, there are many of them that do take babies. Now, the time that the child remains in that setting every day is important, because the brain is stimulation, as you will see, does not provided satisfactorily in daycare centers. It depends too as well in the relationship between the child, the infant, and the parents in general, but more particularly so the mother, which is usually the person that is in charge of the infant. So the amount of interaction between the mother and the infant after he comes from the daycare center every day is important as well. You will imagine many people with babies that work the whole day are very tired by the time they come home, and frequently they are not in the best of dispositions to deal with a child, an infant, a few months old, maybe a few weeks old, a toddler, a year or two old, that is somewhat unhappy, cranky, and creating some difficulties. Obviously, the age of the child, as I told you, is very important. Some daycares are good, incidentally, for all the children. Once they are 3, there are some daycares that are very good at that age, but they are not the rule, they are the exception. And I hope that you'll be able to sort in your own minds what it is that you need to investigate before you place one of your children in any such place. Now, in order to understand the dangers in the age that I have referred to, obviously you need to have some familiarity with the degree of immaturity of the brain of the human infant at birth, and what it needs in order to develop ideally. That's according to the genetic blueprint determined by heredity. And I will try to show you what are the facts that are involved in this. Once you understand that, you can draw your own conclusions of how they care as you see this program. Now, an adult human brain, which is, I call this like the marbles of the human brain, is probably the most complex structure in the universe. I don't know if people are fully aware of that. There is nothing of the complexity of the brain in the universe. An adult human brain weighs 1,200 to 1,300 grams. When you are born, it only weighs a fourth of that, 300 to 200 to 350 grams. So it has a lot of growing ahead of it. By 2 years, it would have trebled in size. In other words, it may weigh 900 to 1,050 grams, which is about 2/3 of the adult size. Now, by 2 years, as I said, it has trebled in size. It which is really quite remarkable. Now, if you think about it, and you think how much it has grown in these 2 years, would it not seem reasonable to you to conclude that this time when the brain is growing fastest and putting itself together are particularly critical period to receive the necessary stimulation? It is a stimulation of a large number of different types provided in the interaction of human beings with the infants, particularly by the mother, the parents in general, the family, the primary family, and the child, that achieve that ideal growth. Without it, brain will mature not to the degree of excellence that it would if it received the different types of stimulation that it requires. If not, obviously the result may be a structure, the brain structure, which though not necessarily damaged in the strictest sense of the word, may certainly not have developed to its full ideal potential. And what I mean is this: that may be the difference between having an IQ of 90 and an IQ of 120 or 130. In other words, if you receive, and this has been demonstrated, appropriate stimulation, your IQ will be higher. If you lack stimulation, then your IQ will be lower. Now, will you have a square head or something like that? No. But you functionally will be at the lower end of the intelligence scale, which was possibly totally necessary if you have received appropriate amounts of the stimulation. Now, incidentally, that's not only true of humans, it's true of animals as well. So it is important for you to take that into account. Now, I want to give you a little more information, perhaps about that, a little later on. Now, the brain, as you see, there has 100 billion neurons all active at the same time. Can you imagine that? Can you visualize in your mind a structure that is contained in this small body box, which is the head, and it doesn't occupy all of the head, just the top of it, that has 100 billion units, all communicating with each other and active at the same time? That's why I was telling you that the complexity of the brain is unique, and probably there is nothing similar in the universe. Now, that's a simple neuron. Many of you are familiar with that, but just in case you have not been well acquainted with what neurons are, this is one of the 100 billion. There are many types, different types, but this is kind of a prototype. And as you see, let me show you. It's a cell. This longer part, the longer part coming towards me, the screen, with these various branches at the end, is in fact called an axon, right? And in the other side, coming out of the body of the cell, as you see over there, are things that are called dendrites. These are the dendrites. There are any number of them, and they branch, and those branch, and those branch again, and so in the end, as you will see, any one of these neurons is connected to another 100,000 neurons. That's a very complex system, isn't it? And it is for that reason. These dendrites, which are there simplified, will divide, and this will divide, and that will divide, and so it goes, you know. And in the end, as I said, many of them will, most of them have connections with another 100,000 neurons, make it very complex circuits in the brain. Usually, the way things are transmitted in the brain, information, they come from an axon to one dendrite. There'll be another neuron over here with the dendrite, it be connected to the dendrite, and then it goes to the body of the cell of the neuron, and finally, after it is processed, they is sent out again through the axon to another neuron, and that happens at an incredible speed. It's impossible to figure out the speed at which it happens. It's remarkable. This is another neuron of a different type, but what that shows is, if you look at the top part, it looks like a tree with a lot of little branches. These are the dendrites. You see they are divided and divided and divided and divided, and each one of these is connected with something else. And so you can see the complexity of that. That is a brain cell in the cerebellum. It's called a Purkinje cell. Now this is a graphic representation of what happens. As you see, this long one here is the axon, and the others are all dendrites that go all over the place and divide themselves. And stimuli come to any one of the dendrites, and sometimes simultaneously from many different places, and that is transmitted to the other cells through the axon. It's processed very rapidly. It takes an incredible speed. This is the best computer in the world. It's right up here. Now, each neuron, as I told you, establishes a connection with 100,000 other neurons, with the total number of synaptic connections at 10 to the potency of 27. I don't know if you can imagine that, but I cannot. The number of possible combinations of synaptic connections is in the range of 10, to a potency of 1 million. It's impossible to imagine that. But you see the complexity of this format. And it's not, we are not born so that all of this is in place. In fact, you are born with an instrument that is being developed, both in the anatomical and the functional sense of the word. It's as if you are developing a computer and adding hardware to it so it can perform more and more complex functions. And at the same time that you're doing that, you are programming the computer, and the programs become more and more complex, and they have to take place in a certain sequence if they are going to be ideal and give you the best computer up here, if you want to use that metaphor. But imagine, all of these connections are not accidental. They are related to the type of stimuli that you receive. Indeed, early on in life, there is something called pruning of neurons, which means many that are not used are simply eliminated. And though we have, as you see, 100 billions, and we can eliminate a lot of them and still be within the range of the normal, the difference in the qualitative functioning of the brain is going to be very different according to how many you dispose of pruning. Brain development never stops, never. At least not as long as we are open to learning. Because these connections are constantly being made. When you are learning something, you are making connections that contain that learning. And when you activate these circuits, then you have that knowledge at hand. You can retrieve it. And so it never ends. As long as you are able to learn, this brain is making, these synapses are taking place and new combinations of these cells are taking place. By the same token, brain programming never stops either. As Andreasen remarked in 2001, each one of us is a unique person and has a unique brain, primarily because each of us has had a different combination of life experiences that has shaped who we are. That's a very profound statement. It looks very simple, because it's not only that it says who you are and what character you have and what you like and what you don't like, but it talks about the functional capability of your brain, who you are in terms of your intelligence, your ability, your potential to do well, to develop, to be creative, to be constructive, and things of that kind. She continued. Yes, she's a professor of psychiatry. Furthermore, as we live each minute of each day and each day of each year, we make choices that change our brains and ultimately change who we are. Our brains are constantly rewiring themselves. As I said a moment ago, when you learn anything, you have to rewire part of your brain where that knowledge is contained. And if you can do that, then you can learn. Now, we need, when we look at the problems that are involved in a child that is, whose brain is being in the process of developing, to a number of set of variables. Essentially, there are three that are important. Some come from the child himself. In other words, what is going on in that brain of the child that will lead to the maturity of the brain. The other one is the type of environment, including the human objects that care for him, what kind of environment that is. Those resulting, and the third one is those that result from the interaction between the endowment, that is your genetic givens, and the environmental influence of those genetic givens. Immaturity of the brain at birth, this is important, the most immature of all mammals. The human infant is, not all the mammals, is born with that degree of immaturity. I always use the example of a foal. A foal, a man has a foal, drops in the ground now within a few hours, 3, 4, 5 hours. She will have him standing on his feet and capable of running faster than she can. It takes us anywhere to up to 11 months to 14, 15, 16 months to start taking steps and walking, let alone to be able to run at the speed that a horse can run. Now, that's obviously a part of the endowment and the genetic endowment of the horses and what has made them survive. Because in the whole social structure, the running is essential for survival. And that's why they have survived this long. And in that structure, it's a foal. The foal runs ahead, the mare is behind the foal, and the stallion is behind. And if there is danger, all of them run, including the stallion, in that order. And it's so designed that the foal can run faster than the stallion and the mare. It's faster, can go. And obviously that protects the new generation of horses. And that's what the horse does. The stallion will only turn around and fight if he is caught and has nowhere to go, cannot escape the danger. Then he will fight and defend his family, otherwise he will run. Do you see the enormous difference in the maturity? If you compare any other mammal to the human brain, there is no comparison. We take years to reach a level of maturity that most animals reach in a few weeks or a month. Remember that the weight of the brain is only 300 grams at birth. And remember too that there is a need of environmental stimulation in order to complete the brain development ideal. In the past, people thought the brain developed by itself. And when anatomical and biological processes will push the development forward, and that was it. In reality, we now know, and there is an enormous amount of evidence about this, that unless certain forms of stimulation are present, that development is going to be very seriously handicapped. It will take place. But it takes place in the form that I described to you. You may reach an IQ of 85 or 90, 95 when you could have been 140. Well, that's the difference between a menial job and being Albert Einstein. You understand what I mean? It's an enormous difference for a species that has only one chance at life. Now, what happens? What does the environmental stimulation do? Why is it important? Well, it does a variety of different things. Much of them may be surprising to you. It promotes the dendritization of the neurons. You remember these branches that come out and divide and divide? If there is not enough stimulation, instead of developing many branches, they develop less branches. This, as I told you, some of these branches, if they are not stimulated appropriately, the brain seems to, or biology seems to assume that they are not needed and will prune many of them out. You lose them forever. Never get them back again. So, obviously, the more dendrites you have, the more connection you can establish, the better circuits you have up here that can handle information in much better ways than if you are limited that way. Peculiarly enough, it promotes vascularization in certain areas of the brain. And vascularization and function are very closely related, as you are well aware of. It promotes myelinization. What that means, all nerves have to be covered. It's like an electric wire. If you leave it without cover, it will short circuit. It doesn't transmit the current efficiently. If you cover it, then it speeds the transmission tremendously. Well, that's what happened to human beings. When we are born, we are essentially, much of us is demyelinized. In other words, there is no myelinization of the pyramidal ways of, of the nerves that run in the spinal cord and will control, the neck, your hands, your thorax, your abdomen, and your legs. And that's why, as you know, human development is progressive, and it goes from the top of the head to the top of your toes, to the tip of your toes. In other words, the first thing that you control is your neck. Babies, as you know, are born without the ability to raise the head or look right or left. In fact, the neck goes all over the place. That's when you hold the head. It takes about 3 months for myelin to move down sufficiently to allow these nerves to control the muscles that allow you to keep your head up or turn right and left. It takes a few more days to do that so that you can use your hand, open your hand and use it as an instrument to grab things, to touch things, to bring them to your mouth, And all of this is programming the brain. All of this is creating more connections. All of this is giving more meaning to your experiences. All of this means you are learning at an incredible speed. Yeah? If you cannot hold your head at 3 months, your development is being significantly retarded. And children that have been raised in institutions, and we have shown here a few days ago, several films of this type become developmentally retarded. And you may have a 14, 15-year-old child that still can sit or hold his head. Certainly can walk, and certainly have not developed a speech. And as you know, there are critical periods for all of this, and after a certain amount of time, though finally they will walk. The level of excellence, the fine motor coordination is not going to be what it is, or they finally will develop language. They'll never make a behavior hateful, because they'll be handicapped that way. So myelinization is incredibly important, and it has a certain sequence and a certain type of stimulation coming from the interaction of the environment with the child, mostly the mother with the child, kind of stimulates myelinization, which means the pyramidal, the construction of the pyramid, the development is taking place in an orderly manner. And now you control your neck, and you can scan 180 degrees the world. While before if there was a noise over there, you couldn't look over there. Now you can, and you can relay that noise to whatever it is that you see at that particular point. You see how the connections, the circuits are being developed. These are simple examples. Obviously, the degree of complexity of this is tremendous, but that's what happens. More important than that, perhaps, is that it promotes signal stimulation, biochemical and hormonal processes in early infancy. And these processes are extremely important. Let me give you a few examples of these. I don't want to make it too technical and complicated. So, then there is the role of impoverished or enriched environment. These have been studied in all kinds of animals, particularly in rats. And people frequently say, well, a rat and a human being are so different. Well, yeah, we are very different from rats, but let me tell you something. 95%, we share about 95% of genes with rats. Well, the difference is not as great as people think, which is in itself interesting. Okay. I want to read you a couple of things. Go to so you get a little better feeling for these things. This incidentally is all taken from a paper that was published in a journal called Neuropsychoanalysis, which I wrote some while back, and it's called Reflection, Psychoanalysis and Neuroscience, Normality and Pathology in Development, Brain Stimulation, Programming, and Maturation. And you can download it from their webpage, and that will give you a lot more information that I can give you in an hour if you need. Okay. Let me see. I have some problems reading because I want to learn ophthalmologist, and then got late with my eyes, and so that created a problem. In any case, let's talk about myelinization a little bit. And I say that here again, there is evidence from animal experimentation suggesting clearly that environmental stimulation has significant effect upon ultimate structure and function. Sometimes stated that animal experimentation suggests that the myelinization of the specific nerves can be accelerated by a stimulation of the nerves, and there is, of course, a considerable relationship between the function of nerve fibers and its state of myelinization, which I already explained to you. Another author by the name of Kettner had apparently made similar observations in human infants. Premature human babies whose eyes were exposed to light since birth show more mature optic nerve development than other full-term infants of an equivalent age at the time of their death. In other words, the premature babies receive more visual stimulation than those that were born at term, and consequently show a greater degree of development than that child. Now, in terms of the biochemical mechanisms that are involved, let me give you this example. Recent studies suggest that maternal deprivation, we're talking now rats, remember what I told you about rats, in the pup rat, for example, creates biochemical imbalance that alters some enzymatic and hormonal systems. Several authors describe rats separated from the mothers and placed in an incubator for periods of an hour or more show a reduction of 50% of the substance called ornithine decarboxylase, ODC, in the brains and heart. Now, ODC is the first step in the synthesis of polyamines and is generally increased in those tissues that are undergoing rapid growth and differentiation, which means if you don't get the stimulation, if you don't produce the ODC, these organs don't develop ideally. They will still develop, but not ideally. This type of experiment supports the hypothesis that maternal deprivation determines a neuroendocrine reaction that includes a diminution in serum of the level of the growth hormone, and that this in turn is responsible for the diminution of ODC in the animal's brain. The role of the impoverished or enriched environment is well demonstrated in animal experimentation, and I will not spend any time on that. But as you know, an enriched environment makes animals a lot more intelligent and capable of solving problems, confronted with problems than the ones that are raised in an impoverished environment. Now, while the brain is developing and forming itself, it is at the same time being programmed. And that's unique to us, to brain development. To the biology of brain development is more unique to human beings than to any other animal because we are born with the most immature of brains. So while it is acquiring the anatomical structure on the basis of which functions will be performed, it's being programmed, It's like if you had a computer that is being developed, and as it is being developed, you are putting software that becomes more and more complex as more and more hardware is added to the computer. So it can in time perform the functions of which it is capable. Language, for example. You have to develop the centers of language, which in most people are in the left hemisphere, if you are right-handed. And that's why people who have strokes in the left brain will lose speech. It affects this area, while a similar stroke of the right brain is not going to do that at all. Again, it relates function with vascularity, obviously. But in any case, sooner or later, we all develop language centers. Will we develop language? No. What language you will develop? It depends on what culture you're born. Depends what you hear. Depends what symbols in the sense of sounds, noises that you can organize and acquire symbolic meaning. And if you are born in China, you learn Chinese. If you are born in the United States, you learn English. You don't learn all the languages automatically. You have to be programmed to learn a language, and you will learn the one that your family programmed you to learn. So that's give you an idea of the importance of these things. Now, another factor that is extraordinarily important is the constancy of objects. In other words, like anything else, if you change the person that is trying to teach you to learn to read, and you get a different one every day, or every 2 days and so on, your capacity to learn that to learn to read is going to be very badly handicapped because the method is being changed. You need constancy in the approach, and that constancy obviously exists in a family where there is a limited number of people with certain patterns of behavior that are typical and the child will get to know, but they don't exist in a daycare center where there might be 6, 7 different people taking care of the child at different times during the day and at different times in the different days, different people during different days. So even if they receive some degree of stimulation, it cannot be as well integrated and put together with meaning as when there is constancy of the objects. So there is a problem when there are a multiplicity of caretakers, and of course it partly depends on who is the caretakers and who they do approach the child. That is in terms of programming the brain. There is another factor that is similarly important, and it is the following one. Beyond programming the brain, the ability to develop relationships requires the constancy of an interaction with a human object, the infant with one person. I always give the example of the complexity that this has in human beings and the capacity for human-object relationships later on is significantly influenced by whether you have achieved what is called in our field object constancy and the right time or not. What that means is that at some point you value the object more than the function of the object. In other words, if you are a very young infant and let's say your mother disappears and somebody else comes and takes you care and feeds you, you accept the food because the need is greater than the attachment to the object. But that gets balanced differently later on, and by 14, 15 months, children have reached object constancy, which means now the object that provides for the need is as important or more important than the need, and that's observable. So if the mother of an infant dies when he is 14 months and somebody else comes and tries to feed him, he's going to refuse the food. He's going to turn around from her and will cry and be very cranky. In the end, he will accept it because it's a basic survival mechanism, but it will leave an enormous imprint on him because he's now attached to that object in such a way that the object is more valuable than the function that the object provides. I always tell people that this is an incredibly important achievement in human beings because your relationship later on will be based on this model. And whether you relate to people in an object constancy level, which means you value people for who they are, and because you love them and because they are important to you, independent of what they can do for you once you develop a relationship to them. Or you value people for the function that they provide for you, like in infancy, because they feed you, they comfort you and so on. Well, if you will imagine, people in this last group that relates only on the basis of satisfaction of the needs are a problem to relate to. You get married to one such person, you are in trouble. You get sick or whatever it is, and you are no longer any use to them because now they have to take care of you and they don't know how to do that. They know only how to relate on the basis you gratify my needs, you satisfy my needs. I don't have to give you anything, which is what happens early on in infancy before object constancy is reached. One object constancy is reached, then you value the object per se, and even if the object can no longer fulfill the function that it did before, you are not inclined to abandon that object. You love that object, take care of that object. You have become a human being, not an animal. And that is modeled on these earlier events. I always say, and I want to repeat it here today, that it takes us 14 months to get there, and it's a gradual process. substitutes. As I told you, if you lose your mother early on as an infant, you will accept a substitute very quickly. If that happens when you are 11, 12 months or so, that, yeah, you will accept a substitute, but you will show signs of your distress. Indeed, as you know, babies by the 8 months of life show what is called estranging anxiety, somewhere between the end and 10 months, which means they recognize the familiar and feel safe with the familiar and are attached to the familiar. Anything that doesn't look like that is a threat to them, and that's a normal mechanism. It's a very normal mechanism. It's the way it should be. It takes a constant interaction between a human object and that child to develop object consciousness. If you change the object every day of the week, they are not going to be able to develop object consciousness. Just as if your child is raised by a nanny, his primary object is going to be the nanny, not the mother, you know. And she is the one who would have programmed that child's brain, not the mother, you know. That's the biological event giving birth to a child. Being a psychological mother means an interaction between the child and the mother. Now, I always tell people to compare that in humans, that takes anywhere up to 14 months of constant interaction of a constructive, positive manner, to what happens, let's say, with the goose or other birds, animals. In the goose, I always mention the case of Conrad Lawrence, who of course was aware that little goose get attached to whatever move into the field of action the moment they hatch. You know, they get the head out of the egg, and whatever is moving, that's mother goose, and they follow that blindly. They have already attached themselves to an object, that's the object where they feel secure, and it only takes 1 instant. 1 instant after hatching whatever move in the field of vision. What Lawrence is that he hatched this little goose, this goose egg, and when they were hatching, he would walk in front of them, and then in his camp, you know, all of these little goose were following him all over the place because he had become mother goose, you know, because he moved in the field of action, in the field of vision, the moment of hatching. You do that to an infant and you think that will happen? No, it takes 14 months. And it takes 14 months of constant interaction and satisfactory types of interaction to develop object consciousness. And as I said, that be a model for life. It will speak to the quality of your ability to relate to other human beings and on what basis, on what kind of attitude you will relate to them. So as you see, it's enormously important. Now, we have talked then about the factors that come from the child in terms of maturation, embryological process, heredity, the genetic blueprint, and how the genetic blueprint cannot be ideally fulfilled unless there is the other side of the equation, environmental stimulation. And that there must be a large variety of different forms of stimulation, ideally provided by the same object for significant number of hours of the day to reach the ideal brain development. Now, let's talk now a little bit about the facilities, physical facilities of the daycare center. And I will show you some vignettes that are upsetting, so I warn you that they are somewhat upsetting to look at. But that's the reality of many of these places. You should know that in most countries, these daycare centers are only in theory regulated. The ones you're going to see here were licensed by the government and by the state authorities in the states where these daycare centers exist, and where these videos were taken. The videos were taken in the following way. In fact, it's a video that was produced by ABC, the network, ABC or TV, who sent some people posing as researchers to several daycares, and they left hidden cameras in there that essentially videotape what happened during the day in these different places. And then they put that together and make this particular videotape. We have it here. It's an hour long. I only want to show you a few minutes of it. But one day we should see it all. We certainly will show it to the students here, our psychoanalytic students, because I think it's important to see what happens in full. So there is the question of the facilities. In this country, I should add to you that in the United States, unfortunately, great power as we are, greatest country in the world in many, many ways, in this area we are finding behind most industrialized countries. This so-called industry of daycare, I call it an industry, I don't know, but they call it an industry, is badly regulated, and such regulations as do exist are appalling. In other countries, civilized countries, like Sweden, Denmark, and Norway, this is completely different. They seem to value children in some ways more than we do here, at least if you judge by the way we regulate these places. And in there, you will see people that take care of these children, in fact, have university degrees. You cannot run one of these places unless you have a degree of human development, of high qualification of it. The people that work in these places are enormously selected with an enormous amount of care. And they have to be people with a minimum level of education and understanding of human development, otherwise you cannot be employed. Of course, these places pay good salaries. These people are well remunerated. In this country, the laws change from one state to the next, and I can only say that one state is worse than the other. And the laws are absolutely ridiculous. I will mention some of them to you, and you will see the examples here. So the physical facilities of the daycare center, which include who is the people employed there, what is their education, what is their knowledge about children, what kind of people they are, is important. Obviously, in the experience that these infants will have and these small children will have. In many states, including the state of Michigan, where I wrote the paper on daycare centers and was a professor there at the time, this paper on daycare center on which this lecture is significantly based. One of the requirements to be employed in a daycare center was that you were otherwise unemployable. You know what that means? You couldn't be employed regularly. You couldn't hold a job regularly because you probably were drug addicted or alcoholic or not verified or whatever it was. So being unemployable gave you priority to be employed in these places. I don't need to tell you that some of the people that you will see in a moment are working for minimum wages, miserable wages. And yet they have the responsibility for the most precious possession that we possibly have as parents, the most precious possession that any country has, their children. Your future, my future, the future of this country is going to be in the hands of these children. You know? So it really is, it blows your mind the way sometimes we go about some of these things. Let me show you some examples of it. And please be prepared to be upset because they are not very nice.
We saw filthy floors, children sleeping next to smelly pails of dirty diapers, broken cribs, unsafe changing tables, children who were kept in cribs all day long, This one got his leg stuck in the bars. No worker was in the room for hours. When this child tried to climb out of an open window, the worker walked by, but doesn't stop him. And there was this.
So that gave you an idea of the mayhem that this kind of situation produced. Let me show you other examples, and I want you to watch the chaos. I think you saw some of it. I want you to watch for the chaos and the brutality that the children are exposed to one another, and sometimes in terms of the very staff that is taking care of them, as you will see, much to everybody's distress. But these children are incredibly aggressive, out of control, hit each other everywhere, head everywhere, you will see. It's really scary to see that that's going on the whole day in places like that. But that is exactly what is happening. That's exactly what is happening. Let me show you this one.
It's 9 in the morning and 24 children are being watched by just one woman, 4 times the number the state allows. There's such bedlam you can't even hear the crying of the babies still lying on the floor in car seats. Babies who will stay in those car seats virtually all day long. Before long, the owner arrives with more kids and more chaos. Now 2 people are watching 27 children. For hours it's screaming, fighting, mayhem.
One worker for 24 children. The law in this particular state requires 1 for every 6 children of tolerant age. Obviously, if there were babies, you require more staff than that. You know, no mother can provide services for 6 children, right? 6 babies, it's really impossible. You are quintuplets, you are a friend only. Remember, the fact is that human beings conceive one child, takes 8 months to grow it and deliver it, and it takes another year and a half. You know, in most cases, to be able to produce another child if you are that quick about it. And there is some rationale in that. That's not just accidental. That's the way nature has devised, given our needs, it has devised a system of human beings, growth and development.
We showed them this scene in which a child during afternoon play threw up all over himself. The only worker in the room is busy feeding one of the babies, so she tells the little boy to wait. 15 minutes later, the worker gets up and leaves the little boy sitting there. The floor is finally cleaned, but the boy is not. He's put in the kitchen. He waits while a worker changes diaper after diaper. And finally, after 40 minutes, he's cleaned up and sent back out with the other children.
Now, here you already heard about the number of staff, ratio of staff to, patient or daycare child at the various stages and the laws that regulate these facilities and how easily they are broken and they are simply neglected. Let me show you a little more of what happens in there.
We noticed in particular one little boy named Patrick, who had been wandering around all by himself all morning. He's about 1.5 years old, too old for a car seat, too young to be with the big kids. No one paid him any attention. Even at lunch, little Patrick went completely unnoticed. He never got a bottle. He never got a meal. He stumbles around the center hungry and tired, and finally collapses on the floor of the kitchen, an exhausted little heap. And what about the babies who are spending the whole day in those car seats? Except for a bottle and one diaper change, they haven't been played with or held for almost 5 hours. Even the ones who have been crying all morning long. At one point, a little boy on the sofa, with no one around to stop him, steps on and repeatedly kicks a 5-month-old in the face while her cries go unnoticed.
It's sickening. And these babies, remember, they are describing 5-6 hours without any interaction with anybody except the amount of noise and excessive stimulation. Now it's interesting because the brain early on has a limited amount of tolerance for overstimulation. Too much stimulation is not good. It's like overloading electrical circuits in this world. You put too many things here, you create a problem in short circuit, and eventually the building will, burn itself. Will develop a fire. Well, that doesn't happen in the brain. It doesn't develop a fire, but it doesn't wire itself appropriately. The connections are not done in the appropriate manner at all. So these babies, as you see, are essentially sitting there tied to these seats, with nobody paying any attention to them at all. In fact, they are not even properly fed. They were changed once in 5 or 6 hours, and fed once in 5 or 6 hours. That's not a very good environment for a child. Let's take a look at who is the staff. And I told you that one of the training penny. This country doesn't require any. People that run this get licensed without any particular qualification of child development or anything of the sort, which is quite special if you think about it, given all we know about human development at this particular point in time. But that's the way it is.
It's now late afternoon. The parents will be arriving soon. Time to clean things up. Our stationary camera logs a frenzy of diapers being changed. No hands are washed, and the diapers are changed on a sofa where children play. Again, this spreads disease. This child waited so long to get his diaper changed, he finally removed it himself. And the potty, which several children had used one after another, it got tossed under the sofa without being emptied or cleaned.
Remember what I told you? These people are earning minimum wages. They have no interest in these children. It's an awesome task to work in one of these places and to have to put yourself in the situation as well. Yes, we become very empathic with the children. The same of them. You need a job. You need to eat. You need to put some bread. Maybe you pay one home. Maybe you have children. Most of us. They have to work in some form or another, and what they can get is these menial jobs, minimum wages, and they will have to live in this mayhem. 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day, week in, week out, and so imagine how can they feel about this? You have 24 children around you shouting, fighting with one another and creating problems and hurting each other. And it's a very destructive environment for the children and for the staff, really, quite frankly. One cannot but have some sympathy. Now, I already told you that the criteria for selection in this country is essentially non-existent. You have to be able to accept minimum wages and really be very little the job to take a job like this, where the work conditions are so unsatisfactory that they are here. And most of these people have absolutely no education. Clearly they can get better jobs than these conditions of work. And it's sharp contrast with such countries, as I mentioned to you, in Scandinavia, where in fact it becomes it's a totally different kind of situation.
But our stationary camera had recorded a punishment that was never used when we were in the room. He was hit on the head not once, but look carefully, twice more.
That child was thrown into the cot because he was crying, was hit on the head once and then twice more by the staff. That's the woman, the staff. That is deadly. You can brain damage a child that way. So essentially, that is what I had to tell you today about these things, and I let you draw your own conclusions. I gave you the data, the information on what it takes for a brain to develop ideally, and you can contrast that with what happened in these places. And if you think of these babies that are in these car seats for 5-6 hours without being approaches, in the middle of an absolute chaotic situation, an enormous amount of noise, totally protected from all kinds of negative experiences, and not receiving any kind of positive experiences at all, you judge whether that's where you want to put the children. That's where we, as a nation, should put our children. And whether we, as a nation, should be able to regulate this a little better than we are at the present time. So if you have any questions, I'd be glad to try and answer them for you.